Yeah, thank you all for coming. This is super exciting. Thanks to Rüdiger for organizing this. And so the plan is to have a virtual panel discussion that we are recording on SysML conformity. And we have some great experts here. I want you to introduce yourself in a minute. Before we start, I just want to make clear this is not about explaining what SysML version 2 actually is. We assume that everybody who's interested in this recording will already know what SysML 2 does, what it's supposed to do, what it does better, and so forth. That's not the topic. But we're talking here about a very serious topic, which is making sure that we have SysML conformity. And so before we actually start with the discussion and the questions, I would like you to all introduce yourself, and I will simply call you out in the order that you appear on my screen here. And so Robert, why don't you start?
Absolutely. Hi, so my name is Robert Karban. I've been working in the MBSE field, in particular with SysML for a long time, since about 2007. Leading one of the MBSE initiatives of INCOSE back then. And out of that work, a lot of things actually made it into the SysML 1 standard. For example, proxy ports is one of the things that came out of that work. I co-chaired SysML 1 revision task force for a couple of years, and then participated also in the SysML v2 submission team. As a JPL jet propulsion lab principal systems engineer.
Thank you. Andreas.
Yeah, thank you. So Andreas Pollom is my name. First time I came into contact with MVC SysML was around 2015 as a student research assistant at the chair of Professor Dr. Eigner and later Professor Dr. Göbel of Virtual Product Engineering at the University of Kaiserslautern. Since 2019, I'm working at the Fraunhofer Institute for Experimental Software and Systems Engineering at the Department of Embedded Systems Engineering by Dr. Becker. And there I'm mostly working in the field of MBSE in connection with variability management and realization. There I have experience in different sectors like defense, also automotive and aerospace, where I had different guys to develop an own methodology and an own approach on integrating systems engineering in their development.
Great. Thank you. Vince, how about you?
Yeah, my name is Vince Molnár. I'm an assistant professor at Budapest University of Technology and Economics. I've been working with MBSE also since 2015. I've been giving trainings and I have a course in this topic, but my other research field is basically formal methods in general and formal verification more specifically. So this is one of the reasons I was gravitated to SysML v2 to try to verify v1, but the semantics is really an issue here, and v2 promised to be different. v2 is much more formal. It's a very nice language, and this is how I got into the SST, the SysML v2 submission team, where I did a lot of work with the execution working group guys, and I also became co-author of the kernel modeling language, even though only for a couple of paragraphs, but it counts. And now I'm leading the formal methods working group, and more importantly to this topic, the conformance working group of the systems modeling community, with the goal of coming up with solutions to check if future tools will be conformant or should be conformant with the language.
Great. Thank you. And Daniel.
Yeah, I'm Daniel Siegl. I'm from Lieber. We're a small Austrian MBSE tool vendor. We are famous for Lemon Tree, our different merge tool for models. And my themes are all around collaboration with models. This is my main topic that drive me. I was also co-chair of a SysML work group in ProStep that tried to establish SysML interchange for the automotive industry based on SysML v1. This was a failure to some extent. And so for me, everything that enables exchange, model exchange is very important, and therefore conformance is required. And as a small tool vendor, I think conformance is also important because I cannot afford to implement everything at the moment. So we need some levels that make it more affordable to implement SysML v2 capability. And my secondary role is that I'm assistant director for standards at INCOSE. So I'm also involved in the standardization workflows on INCOSE level.
Great, thank you, Daniel. And last, we have Rüdiger here, who is also working for Lieber, who organized this event. And my name is Michael Jastram. I have a blog in systems engineering in Germany, and I'm just super curious about these topics, so I will only take on the role as the moderator. Having said that, we all know what SysML2 is. It is as good as published. I think it's like in this phase where it is frozen, and basically we'll wait for the official release. But I know that already many organizations are working on it, working with it, looking at implementations. But here the big questions of interoperability comes in, and this leads to the first question. The question is, what is SysML conformity in the first place, and what's the scope of it, and why is it important? Who wants to start with this question?
I see.
Yes, I can. Yeah, so where does this all start? The first thing where you can spot conformance or conformity is actually in the RFP. So at the conception of SysML v2, there was also a concern about conformity, and there is a requirement about this. So to complete the standardization, we have to come up with criteria to be able to tell if a tool is conformant or not. This is the origin. There are actually 5 areas in the specification specified about conformance. In short, these are abstract syntax, concrete syntax, semantic conformance, model interchange, and domain library. These are not finalized, so we came up with a lot of ideas which are outside of these, but this is already in the standard. The standard defines these areas as fields of conformance.
Great. Anybody else?
I can take that one. Seeing it from a practitioner standpoint and what issues we encountered, right? People still encounter on the SysML v1 conformance level, right? And that's that history that has been going on for almost 20 years now. So I think there's a number of levels, right? So if there's conformance, first you have to have conformance, right? Because in SysML v1 there is not. And I think to have conformance is a good thing because there's you can somehow assess the implementation against what you buy and what you can use as a practitioner. And then I think there's several dimensions to that conformity or the conformance. One is what parts of the language, apart from the things that Vince mentioned, that it actually conforms to the concrete syntax and the abstract syntax and so on. But I think the other level is also which parts of the language are implemented by the vendor, right? Because the SysML v2 is huge, right? There's a lot of stuff. And I think it would help probably the vendors, in particular new vendors, to have a couple of different levels, which parts of the language you want to cover. Like, for example, the basic things, no structure, behavior, but maybe not variability, right? So that could be a conformance criteria of which parts of the language you want to cover in the textual and in the graphical notation. I think that's one dimension. The second dimension is since now there is an API, right, which is a huge step and a standardized application programming interface. So I think there we would need a conformance to that API, and ideally, because I've seen that in other standards, and the OMG has been a bit slow on adopting that there should be a set of how do you test that conformance, right? So W3C was one of the first ones, like for the SEXML standard, for the state chart XML, to have like a set of tests. And the one that followed on the OMG was the PSSM, the precise semantics for state machines, that also had like a set of tests for the execution part. And I think we would need something there for the API for sure. And there's another dimension is the say operational semantics or semantics in general for execution. What's the conformance or compliance of an implementation with the operational semantics of a model, right? And ideally, there would be a set of tests that one could run against implementation and see what the outcome, that it complies to the expected behavior. So I think those are the API, execution, and the levels of let's say, which parts of the language you implement as a vendor.
So that's
the fourth one is interoperability. I think the interoperability, which has never been working before, right? Because in the past it was a huge struggle. There were many working groups at the OMG to make it work and demonstrate it, but it has never been really properly implemented. So I think interoperability conformance should definitely be a part of that.
Well, I mean, like some of the things that you mentioned imply interoperability. Like, for example, if you have API conformance, that is an enabler for interoperability conformance. Does it go?
You also need the model interchange conformance.
Yeah.
So you need to obey the format and the way to obtain it.
Yeah.
And I can bring a very concrete example why it's good for everyone. At the moment, companies that just implement syntax highlighting in a text editor claim they have a SysML v2 implementation. But that's not a SysML v2 implementation, as the textual representation is just a view on the graph, like a diagram. But we have already these guys that tell, yeah, we have a SysML v2 implemented. Yes, they have. They have a syntax highlighting in Visual Studio Code or in Eclipse, and they say it's a SysML v2 implementation. And this is a very concrete example why we need conformance levels so customers know what they get.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point. Sorry, Andreas, you wanted to say something, right?
Yes, so what I saw the last years with conformity is that one big issue on model-based engineering and the modeling part is that different projects in one company couldn't exchange their models, and this is one big thing I hope conformity could push this, that if the models are more conformity against the specification, if there are less in enterprise architect it calls MDG, so less project specific tools, then we can exchange models between projects, we can exchange models across different companies, and I think this is one big point why we should work on conformity.
And I want to take this ball from Andreas real quick. In the work in Pro step to create SysML interchange between the automotive supply chain, one result was that the profilization even kills interoperability if the buyer and the supplier use the same tool. And so, and this is also a call to action from my side, and I said this before in other occasions. If you want to prepare for SysML v2, try to standardize your modeling, your 1.0 modeling, and or 1x modeling, and try not to invent a lot of profiles right now.
I have a follow-up question for Andreas, because this is really interesting because it's first-hand experience. So, Andreas, you said within your organization, essentially the same tools, you couldn't exchange models, right?
Yeah, I experienced in companies where I consult them in developing a model-based systems engineering approach. We saw that different project teams couldn't exchange the whole model or didn't understand the model because everything looks different, everything feels different. So this was this one thing in one tool, but also we experienced that we get a lot of questions on how can we work with different project partners which are not using our tool, which are not using Enterprise Architect. And I hope that SysML v2 pushes in this direction, that the working together above the or above different engineering teams in get increased and get better.
But in the context of Daniel's call to action to standardize the modeling, how much of these problems were due to the modeling language SysML version 1.x, and how many were due to methodologies not being aligned? And how will SysML 2 potentially fix this?
Both. So around, it's difficult to say. It's not 50-50, but I think the specification in different projects is a big thing, because this leads also to not follow methodologies, to get this workarounds things where the user, the engineers are forced to think about it. And one thing is due to time issues often, that the lead systems engineer are looking for a way that the MVC context is, or the systems engineers and the system architects get faster into working, and therefore we saw a lack of conformity to the SysML specification.
And maybe I can hook on to that. I mean, what you saw in SysML v1, I mean, there is an interchange format, right? But practically, it did not work, right? You could not exchange, not even the model itself, right? Not let alone the diagrams, right? Which is another issue. I think maybe you can get some simple models exchanged without the diagrams, but the diagrams, I think, is one issue, because it's in the end many people will model through the diagrams. But then there was an effort at the OMG, which was the model exchange working group, that actually defined a standard model as a well, it was not put as a conformance, but it should have been done like 15 years earlier, right? It's like a standard model, and based on that standard model, you can check the conformance of the interchange, right? Does it export it there? Does it come in right? Re-export? There must be some way to check that exchange works, right? And unfortunately, it didn't take off in SysML v1 for implementation reasons, for complexity of the language, whatever. But also due to because there was no conformance criteria, the vendors didn't have any pressure to do anything about it. And I think the lesson learned there is, if there's no conformance criteria for interchange, I think most of the vendors don't care about that. There is no inherent interest.
Yeah, they want, this is this old thinking from the computer-aided design days, that you invent the file format that nobody else can read, so to protect your claim. But this is not how the industry works 2024. But also the industry is not very good in making pressure on the tool vendors when it comes to forcing interoperability. They are not pushing enough.
So we actually collected some of the concerns that different stakeholders might have, and one of them for the users was ecosystems with compatible tools, right? So what you said, Daniel, is true. From a vendor perspective, it's really not worth opening your file format or tool or whatever, because then your clients can move to your competitor. But this is really not the point. If your tool allows other tools to interface with you, and maybe you can have powerful verification, consistency checking, documentation, code generation, whatever, you have access to all the other tools out there, that's actually a plus. Even though you actually allow your clients to move away, they won't, because, right, this is the best tool out there then, because it can interface with anything.
I mean, if the thing is, if vendors are concerned that the interchange will break their position, then that's the wrong concern, no? Because if the tool is good, people will not move somewhere else, right? I think it's more, as you say, it's based on the ecosystem, right? How can you integrate something with that tool, right? And how can you extend it in an open way? Which is also, for some vendors, they want to keep you in their ecosystem, right? So that's a conflict of interest there. But I think in general, from the engineering standpoint or the practitioner standpoint, I have a huge interest. And I would probably pick that tool that enables me to do that, to integrate with other tools. No? Right. I'm not talking even, as you said, Vince, I think it's not about the same SysML tool. Right? That's one dimension, but the other dimension is with anything else in the ecosystem. Right?
This is what I wanted to point out. That, historically, we are usually speaking about editors and model editors, authoring tools, but this is not the case today. Most of our partners, for example, are interested in integrating their own software, their own code generator, documentation generator, as I said. Exactly. So this is the future. You edit your model, but not only for the sake of having nice diagrams. You actually want to do this to be able to execute it, to derive useful properties.
Exactly. You want to do, and you analyze it, you want to trace it, you want to process it, you want to do whatever with it, right?
And currently it is really unrealistic that a single vendor will be able to provide all the capabilities that you need.
Well, no,
because
for sure.
these are
that's for sure the case. That's for sure the current case. I mean, from what I see there's not so many. I mean, on the OMG side, the other one that comes to mind is the RecIF standard, right, for requirements interchange, which is actually very simple, right? I mean, there's not much, no? Yet. There are tools where you export the RecIF and you cannot re-import into the same tool, right? So I wonder why that happens, right? And let alone among tools, right? There's a huge problem. There's so many different implementations and interpretations, but I'm not sure. But I think there's also no conformance criteria for that RecIF standard, right? There's no standard model that people have to conform to. I'm not sure. I don't think there is, but I think that would be one key element.
Actually, this is something I can say a little bit because I work with that. There is, but I think RecIF is actually a great example of the drivers behind conformity, because one thing that the vendors have learned is that offering RecIF will not make people migrate. Just because there is a lossless format doesn't mean that migration is painless. So, and I think the vendors are learning that more and more, that being open for integration will not mean that people will switch tools in droves. And so I hope that this will be actually something that will work fine with SysML.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is also in big organizations, right? You very likely don't have a single modeling tool, authoring tool, right? I mean, you see that nowadays. There's not only one vendor or the other. There's usually a mix, right? And then companies actually have to come up in the SysML 1 case to build that exchange themselves because it doesn't work out of the box, right? So I think, but Daniel is right. I think there has to be the pressure from the standardization organization in terms of conformance criteria and something executable and something you can test against. But there is also to be the pressure from industry, right? That they insist on that, right?
So something that we talked about, by the way, I just want to share this piece of information with you, is that it would be funny to have a conformance competition or something like that. So the conformance working group could actually host the competition every year and see which of these tools satisfy what parts of, as Robert mentioned, there could be different subparts of the modeling language, different levels, and then every year you would have a constantly updated and maintained landscape of all the tools you have out there. This would be a really nice motivation for vendors.
That sounds interesting. Okay. Right? Conformance hackathon.
Yes, exactly. With OpenMD terminology.
I think because we mentioned RecRF, where I am certainly disappointed when it comes to interoperability, we should also mention BPNN as a positive example. It's a relatively simple language, but they built their language around an interchange format from day one. And they always did these round tables where you had up to 13 vendors sitting around the table, and they were moving the model from the first one to the last one and adding capability as they went forward. And this was always a showcase, and it was on YouTube live, and it was always a good initiative. And there were like 40 people or 60 people in the room, and it was like a party. They served drinks and stuff. So the BPNN guys got that right. That the vendors had to do it.
Okay, cool. I think that's probably good. No? Let's look at the examples where it actually works, or works reasonably. No? And maybe the pressure is also, like Vince mentioned, no? And maybe Daniel also with this, that it's vendors are at the round table. If the conformance is somehow pushed into the public, no, maybe people feel more pressure to be actually complying with those criteria.
So I want to interrupt you once more, because from the conformance working group point of view, I'm also serving the vendors in a sense, and we are speaking about pressure. So this is really not about bullying vendors into behaving some way. It should also be about making it worth it. And the annual contest would actually serve this purpose, because then you would have a free marketing site, right? There would be a collection displaying, showcasing the strengths of your tool for free. You just have to submit something every year, and everybody would be automatically notified that you implemented a new feature or something like that. So I think one of the changes in perspective would be not to force vendors, but to motivate them to do better.
Sure.
Maybe.
And also,
sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
One sentence to add to this. And I think being involved with tool vendors since 20 years, it will become cheaper to develop tools if there is good conformance levels.
Yes.
Actually, that's a great point that I just wanted to throw out as a question. One big problem that I've often seen with quality testing and also conformity, that a lot of stakeholders don't consider it particularly sexy. The vendors, don't see it as something that they can brag about much. The practitioners, have much more fun with new features and true capabilities, but not with, those ready interoperability issues. So I believe for everybody involved, there must be, for lack of a better word, a business case. So there must be a business case certainly for the tool vendors. There must be a business case for their users to basically be willing to pay for it and so forth. And so from this point of view, where are we today with the incentives on working on conformity, and what could we do there to make it even more attractive?
I'm not sure if I have an answer to it, but I think it's a good point, because some things I have heard in the last 20 years, when I asked, okay, what about this thing in the spec? It doesn't seem to be supported, and then I forced something else. Okay, well, nobody asked for it. There's no business case. So I don't have an answer, but that's certainly something I've been hearing about.
Mm-hmm. But then there is the other side of the coin, when clients ask for something which is not in the spec, and that's awkward, because then you have to choose between your clients and the specification. And this is something that has to be addressed on the OMG level, because we have to keep the RTFs going, we have to update the language constantly, so that companies who are conformant are not, behind in the competition.
No, I think that's yet another point. But what I meant is even language constructs which are in the spec were not properly supported in the implementation, right? And then, well, nobody pointed it out yet. But the second thing is, which goes in the direction that you just mentioned, is in the one problem in the SysML v1 spec is that there were, or there are, ambiguities, right? And it was really very hard to implement, right? And then for the vendor it becomes like, okay, do I implement that? I have to make an interpretation of that, right? And is it worth the cost, right? So I think that's certainly some problem.
The question what I have here is, how often get the two vendors feedback from different developer teams? How often do you feedback that some parts of an specification is missing in your project to achieve your goal? And I think that's not enough, right?
Not enough, because it seemed back then I was the only one in the world that submitted tickets to the support system, right? And most others are just silent, right? They struggle along and they don't know
the missing things.
And I'm not sure why, right? But there's just, I remember that I made thousands of little examples where I know that
so it would
apply and then it would be fixed, right? But there's very few people that do that.
Wouldn't it be nicer to submit your ticket to the conformance working group and then we come up with a new test? And then suddenly
exactly. That's
implement something.
Exactly. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and going back to Daniel's point, who mentioned that it would be cheaper to develop tools if we had proper conformance. I think maybe we are not thinking about the same thing, but if we can give you a test suite already, that saves a lot of time.
Oh yeah.
Yes, this is one. And with the test suite, you take out ambiguity. There is an interpretation with a reference implementation, which is the test suite, which saves a lot of money. And with the scope of SysML v2 is very wide. It's far away from a minimum viable product. This is to some extent reasoned by the standardization processes from OMG. So we have a very wide scope at the moment. And for smaller tool vendors, it's almost impossible to afford to implement the whole scope with everything. So also this is something that would help to the customers, because they know what to expect. It passes the test cases or not. And the tool vendors to have clear targets, what to aim for, which part of the scope to implement, because that has the most value for the practitioners.
One thing that I want to come back to the question that Michael had before: why would it be different in SysML v2? And it's somehow there's it sounds like okay, a little bit hard or whatever, but I think SysML v2 can help to make it easier because the foundation is very different. Right? The one big problem with v1 was that it came out of UML devised 1999. It was just a hodgepodge of graphical notations without underlying semantics, really, right? It was just narrative. And then slowly we added more formality with FUML, PSSM, PSCS, and so on. And that made it easier, I think, right? So I think that the goal should be to have something similar. First they have it grounded in formal semantics, so that should help already. For the executability, I think we should not miss the train on v2 for that. So I think that should be a priority in my opinion. And the other thing is there's an API, right? So that certainly should an impetus to accelerate that and help actually to make it easier.
I would like to draw another parallel to RecIF, because few people know that there is actually a test suite. There's also, similar to SysML v2, a reference implementation. Nevertheless, even though the tool vendors were organized in the RecIF working group from ProStep, they did only the minimal work of satisfying the customers. And so I'm really intrigued by what Daniel said about BPMN as an example where this would actually work. And there are also some other examples, like with Google APIs, where you actually can get a certification that you're compliant. And so what I would really like to know from this group, I still don't have a good understanding where the conformance group is today, what visibility there is, and what incentives for the stakeholders exist to take advantage of the work products from the conformance groups, like test suites.
Before Vince will jump in, let me just pick up on the certification, because we have certification for the users, right? There is the OSMP level, basic, intermediate, advanced. Why not for the vendor implementation? I shut up.
No, I agree with the question, by the way. I asked this, and the answer was OMG does not do that. I'm not sure they will never do it. Currently, there is nothing like this, but the working group could do something like this, or the annual competition could be something that replaces this in a way. But yes, I think some kind of certification would actually be useful.
Or in COSE could operate just like they do for systems engineers. This is just my private idea. This is not in any means an COSE opinion, but this could be one solution that in COSE offers it just like it does for engineers.
Regarding incentives, I would like to take a step back, and before talking about incentives to use the products of the conformance working group, it would be really nice to talk about incentives to participate in the conformance working group to get the products in the first place. Because so far, unfortunately, what I experience is that there is a huge interest in this. So people are coming to me asking questions, and this was really nice because I see that this is important. What I don't get very often is people who actually want to do some work to achieve this. We have really nice ideas now, and some people who are probably willing to jump in, but we have to have some, core members who can actually start doing something. And actually, there are things which we could easily do. I will not go into advertising this too much this time, but to answer my own question, I think one of the incentives would be what Daniel mentioned. This is actually useful. If you have a conformance test suite, you can use it to test your software, you can use it to develop your software, and if you don't have to do this alone, but share the effort with all the other vendors, you already won, one per the number of vendors who participate. And this would be nice if more and more companies realize this.
One question along those lines. So is there already a test suite in the conformance group or outside somewhere, and how big is it?
Currently, we have a test suite for the pilot implementation. This was mostly written by Ed Seidowitz, and it is written in Expect, which is I'm not sure it's proprietary, but it's an Eclipse project, which is, I'm not even sure it's maintained anymore. So this is not suitable for a wider release. But there are test cases, because in the pilot implementation, every time Ed implemented some kind of validation rule, he also gave a test for that rule. And this is a really nice source to start with. We already had ideas about how to convert these into tests that you can distribute along with the standard, but we actually have to translate them. So this would be the first step. And then there are other technologies on our radar which could generate test cases. We could come up with test cases manually, but that is a little bit harder. And we are also talking to people who have very nice tools to generate tests, smarter, in a smarter way. For example, by specifying test targets and then generating tests for that. So we have a lot of ideas, and we already have some kind of initial test set. We just have to turn that into the correct format and expand.
I have to say, if I were looking for a PhD thesis right now or something along those lines, I mean, with model generation, I think this would be like a super interesting project for somebody.
That's what we are doing.
Okay.
My research group has 2 people who are working with model generation, and they are already on it. But it's only us, right? So it would be nice to have some.
So on that, maybe I have a question for Vince. There is also like the I'm not sure how the working group is called, but the transformation from V1 to V2.
Yes.
Right. So how is that related to conformance? Right. I mean, there's a lot of V1 models out there, right? And probably not all will be migrated, but a part will be. But certainly, people would like to integrate them, right? They want to reuse what they have in V1 with the new V2 model, right? Because that's a huge investment. So how does conformance play into that field?
So I would be careful with this. First, it would be nice to check if the transformed V2 model is actually conformant or correct,
Right.
And if we make sure that they are correct, I think they would be really nice, non-trivial examples that if you pass the test cases, you can actually showcase that here is a real-life model with a non-trivial size, and I can also process that.
I have a different approach to this. I think if we start to pollute our brand new systems with old data, we will have a mess for many years. Just imagine some old data that was loaded before conformance testing was in place and you don't get it out anymore. I think in reality, to be able to move old assets into the new tooling with industrial strengths, you need the conformance testing and the validation in place.
Sorry, Michael. Another thing that comes to my mind is, I mean, one of the very difficult things in models is configuration management, like branching, diffing, merging. Right? So I wonder if there is any insights of, because SysML has been difficult. How would conformance and V2 simplify that or affect it, or is it completely irrelevant?
Is this question for me, I guess?
Yeah, I think so, yeah, because you are the branching, diffing, merging pro here.
I think it would open up a full new universe. It would be finally possible to exchange models between organizations with the possibility to understand what the other organization changed before you re-import it. It's a game changer, and it would also open up another really important capability that we are missing in the systems engineering space, to have a warehouse with SysML models. It's beyond stupid for 2024 that maybe on the same day 5 people around the world take a data sheet from a COTS product and start to build a SysML block on it. It's simply Stone Age. So we need a store where you can download standard. For example, if you need some component from Honeywell, you don't build your block yourself, but you download the block and you test to the data sheet, And we also need conformance for this to create an incentive for this ecosystem of stock models.
Could you foresee that suppliers give these models? So Honeywell would upload these models on their website, and besides the data sheet, you would get the SysML V2 representation?
Or you might even have something like NuGet where you can browse which components has nice SysML props, and it might even make a difference if you buy the Honeywell component or some other brand component.
For what it's worth, at TDSE last year, that was actually a topic of quite a few conversations that I had. The software world shows how you can build repositories with semantic versioning that allows you to do this and basically align your components, pull updates, keep it consistent. I mean, getting what we have for software development in the modeling world, I think that would be a paradigm shifter. That would completely create a new world. Unfortunately, I mean, this topic I feel is kind of orthogonal to our discussion here. But if anybody here knows of an initiative like that has any chance of success, I'd be super interested in hearing about that.
So one more comment which fits here is that everything in OMG is a community project. So if you have a good idea, you should come and realize it. Okay, and this is not only for you, everybody who watches this or reads this. If you have a good idea or you want something, and this is what Daniel is usually saying, do not stay silent. Come and tell somebody and then do it if you can.
But this is just to get, this is like just, a total side note, personal opinion. I feel that, like, especially ideas like that are big. If you don't have a business case and appropriate funding behind it to really make it big, it will fizzle away. Because, I mean, something like that needs a critical mass. That's my gut feeling. So I'm not sure what...
That's why you should come to the systems modeling community, for example, which already has 60 or even more companies and organizations. And if you just throw an idea there, the visibility is already very large. And if only a fraction of these companies find it interesting, maybe you can spawn a working group. This is what I did with formal methods. You don't need to have all the money and all the companies behind you at the time you propose your idea, but you can actually access a pool of companies who might be interested in your idea, and then that can help.
Okay.
The first time this idea was I had a customer requesting for this idea was 15 years ago. It was Rockwell Collins.
So Vince, I will reach out to you after this about that, because I think this is a super interesting topic that has been on my mind. And I'll take that note with you, Daniel, as well. Just, staying focused on conformity, even though this is like a super interesting topic. Conformity to me is an enabler for that. What I would like to know from you, what are the risks of not achieving SysML v2 conformity, and who are the stakeholders that will suffer the most from that?
I think we all know that well.
Still have to put the question.
I think we have to start a bit earlier here. The biggest problem I see with SysML v2 at the moment is that it might create an Osborne problem. Too many expectations are raised that SysML v2 will be finished this year and you can start to use it immediately. And people start to wait for SysML v2. And I think this is very dangerous, because some SysML v2 projects might not make it commercially if people stop buying into v1. And the second step is that it's very obvious, the silent users will have the biggest pains in their daily work if conformance doesn't fly.
Anybody else?
It seemed to me that Andreas was the most competent in daily use of things like this.
Yes, I was thinking about a point we discussed a few minutes ago, and I wasn't sure if I can talk about it or not. But I think yes. So I'm afraid of that. Nothing changed. So to talk hardly, to find hard work. I'm really afraid of we change from SysML v1 to v2, and not enough changed. And I think conformity is one driver that push us into a big change, because the possibilities, the vendors are consistent to the specification are quite big in many different points we discussed in the last few minutes. So this is my biggest point where I have some inches. And maybe one thing I want to show to you, or to discuss with you, the German defense, so German Bundeswehr, forced their users to really strictly follow the NAV or ADMBW architecture data model of the Bundeswehr to be consistent. And they had this similar issue like we to move models from the old version into the new version, and it worked quite well. The more consistent an architecture was, that the less work they had to add after an automated translation into the new version. So I think there we see a great example why consistency to an specification is really important. It reduces the work in the end.
Okay. Vince, I think you didn't add anything to this question yet, if I see correctly. What are your thoughts?
So I said that we know this world, so I'm also afraid of seeing no change.
Okay.
And this is really easy to fall into. So if you are not fast enough, then if tools start popping up and people start using them before arriving to the point of, stressing conformance enough, I think we can miss the ship. That would be bad.
At some point we will miss the boat. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I share the same concern, right? Just from the painful experience of the last 20 years.
So my estimate is that 99% we will release the standard this year, and probably that's the deadline to have at least something.
Got it.
Right.
Well,
if it comes later, then it's too late.
Yeah, and one thing that is very frustrating is when the status quo starts to become the biggest competitor.
Right.
I think this was like a good discussion so far. One thing that I want to take from Daniel, he's really good at not just basically talking about things, but also, as you phrase it, provide a call to action to really make sure that we instigate change. So with that in mind, can we just go around and can I get from each of you a recommendation and a call to action for the audience, for the readers, so that we can actually get SysML v2 conformity on the right track? Daniel, do you want to start? It's your thing.
Yeah, I think I'm like a lobbyist in this group, and everybody knows that I'm the lobbyist for this topic, and so it's kind of hard to make a call for action. But I think it's very important to get resources now to fix this. We have a maximum 9 months to make something happen, and we need resources. Resources means engineers or cash. And for the large organizations, there will be a big return on investment if they finance 2 engineers for 9 months. The return on investment, if we have a more applicable standard that can be used across the supply chain, will be immense. But we need people that understand that and act now.
I mean, this is a long-term investment, right? I mean, it will define how we can use it, or how it will be used for the next 20 years. I mean, that's a very long time frame.
So,
yeah, I mean, then Daniel says the right thing. So,
but Robert, what would be your call to action, and to whom?
I mean, I think it's along the lines of Daniel, right? I mean, the OMG conformance group can only do so much, right? I mean, if and poor Vince sits there and wants to push things, but if there's no sponsors, then it will be very difficult, right? So sponsors have to come along and push it. I mean, we know that the user base wants it, right? I mean, that we know that for 20 years. And now is a chance, right? Because there was no chance for V1, but now we have one in this limited time frame. So come along with resources, people.
Poor Vincent, thanks for all these. Yes.
So maybe the question is, who's the most...
I want to make one more point. I'm not just talking, I organized some cash.
Yes, he did.
And this is actually what I wanted to ask, and again, I'm trying to be a little bit probing here, but who is the most promising sponsor that we have to nudge over the edge to get this sponsored with personnel and or cash?
So I think it would be really awesome if larger tool vendors could send people, because they already know how SysML v2 works. They already have experience with implementing their tools. They already know the pain points, and they are probably the most interested in actually having the test case really quickly. Everybody else is interested in having the results of the test case. They are interested in the test suite itself. So to me, it would be the best if all these large companies could allocate, I don't know, 1 or 2 engineers on this. We already have the ideas. We have very solid plans. We need some more discussion as well. So if anybody has good ideas, we are always happy to listen. But resources are the most severely missing from this equation.
Okay. Andreas, do you have anything to add?
No, I think we heard a lot of resources, and resources. It's all about in MVC, introducing MVC, introducing a new standard. But I mentioned it a few minutes ago. On long-term side, I think the two vendors need feedback. So it's important to get out of the comfort zone, to get out of this silent user, and take a few minutes to reach out some feedback. What works, what don't work, where are some improvements, also from maybe different tool vendors to optimize all solutions.
I don't want to put you on the spot here, but wouldn't Fraunhofer also be like a group that certainly had the resources and interest of contributing to something like that?
Of course. The thing is, if I sit here and say, yeah, we need to participate, then in a few minutes I get the first call, come to my group. I'm already participating in the system architecture framework group, so also do some things. And Vince, I'm interested in your topic. So if I get some time and some money to participate in your group, I'm also interested. Yes, Fraunhofer, of course, is one big, or should be one big player in optimizing the outcome to the industry.
I can say what I think, so I think it's easier for me to answer. Organizations like ESA, DLR, all the automotive vendors should be able to make a business case to do something.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you very much, Andreas. This shall be the example provided to the world.
All right.
There is still hope.
Well, this was basically like the last question I had here to basically get like this call to action for the viewers and listeners later on. So as far as I'm concerned, we're ready to close this, at least, the official round. Anybody wants to add some last super important thing?
Maybe just one thing. I think many of the companies that Daniel mentioned might not be aware of the potential impact of SysML v2. So I think we still have some work to do here to convince companies that this is actually useful, because what I see is that the apathy comes from doubts that this will really happen. And I think now it is safe to say that it is going to happen. I think this could be the last message here.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you very much to the whole panel. And let's make it happen.